Okay, so we're recording, we're live, we're ready to rock and roll. We're going to be doing some vocab tonight. So get ready to have some fun. So let's get started. First vocab word, an encroachment. An encroachment. What is an encroachment? Anyone who's live with me who wants to participate, feel free to type in the chat what you feel an encroachment is, okay? What do you think an encroachment is? So I'm also going to ask this question while you're kind of typing or putting anything into the chat. So an encroachment is something, okay? It is something. An encroachment is this, and I'm going to give you a typical example of one too. So in a lot of these, I'm going to give you what it is. I'm going to tell you what it is, but I'm also going to tell you like a general idea as to what it is. So an encroachment is an improvement to land that crosses over a property line onto another's property line. Typically, because remember I said I'm going to give you the typical responses to what this is. Typically, it's a fence or something like that. It's typically that, because that's usually what you find on the perimeter of the border, okay? It's usually not a structure of some sort, but it could be. And an encroachment is also a form of an encumbrance, okay? So an encroachment is an encumbrance. So kind of bonus question for you guys, if you guys want to participate. What is an encumbrance? What is an encumbrance on real property? What is an encumbrance? So an encroachment is a type of one. So what is an encumbrance? So an encumbrance, I always say, is a lien, is a charge, is a financial liability, is a physical liability, a usage liability against the property. Basically, it's some sort of detriment. So if I have an encumbrance on my property, it's going to be some sort of lien, some sort of physical encroachment, like we were talking about with the fencing, maybe a shed, something of that nature. It's going to be a detriment, a liability. So a charge, claim, liability, financial, or thereof. So let's keep moving. Let's keep grooving, guys. General lien. What is a general lien? A general lien. So there's two types of liens, right? We have general and specific. So what is the difference between a general lien and a specific lien? Because I think that that's important to kind of classify, right? It's kind of important to know the difference between them, because that's really, you're going to see them compared to one another a lot, okay? So a general lien, let's say I was Scrooge McDuck Moneybags here, and I had, 8, 9, 10 properties, right? At 8, 9, 10 properties. If you sued me or you had a judgment against me, a general lien would be usually in the form of a judgment or income taxes, okay? Because it would go against all 9, 10 of my properties. Also, if I owned a Maserati, a Lamborghini, stuff like that, basically those liens would also be on my personal property, okay? So it would be on all the real property that I own, and it would also be on all of the personal property that I own. So all the real and all the personal property that I own. So a general lien goes on everything, usually in the form of a judgment, or going to be in the form of income taxes, penalization on income taxes, things like that. Those would be classified as general liens. So what about specific? Because remember I said we wanted to talk about specific. So anyone who's live with me who wants to participate, feel free to type in there what you think a specific lien is, okay? So a specific lien, as opposed to that of a general lien, okay, is going to be one that is specific to one property. So what are examples of that? You have mortgage liens, right? Mortgage liens are specific to one property. You also have the general real estate tax liens, so ad valorem taxes. Those would be considered specific liens. Mechanics liens would be specific. And also liens could be voluntary or involuntary, right? They could be something that you voluntarily take on and put on the house. You encumber it because that's part of your bundle of rights. You have the right to encumber your property, right? So you have the right to encumber it. So that is the situation there. That is the difference between a general lien and a specific lien. Discount point. Discount point. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you. Mark this down. Make sure you know this, okay? Make sure that you know discount point, because you will get questions on what a discount point is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you what a discount point is. I'm also going to talk to you about points in general, okay? I'm going to talk to you about points in general. So a discount point is a point that you would pay up front when you're taking out a loan to reduce the interest rate. So if you want to have the interest rate of your property, of your loan reduced, right? So if you want to reduce the interest rate, what happens is you pay the lender an upfront amount. So does anyone know what the upfront amount is? So you're talking about discount points. What is, what is a point? Yeah, Brooke said it. Yeah, 1% of the loan. A point is 1% of the loan. So here's what I want you to make sure that you understand. There's usually a couple times that you pay points. You usually pay number one when you want to discount the interest rate, right? The second time is usually if there's any kind of origination fees. Those would come in the form of points. So regardless of whether it's a discount point, an origination fee, anything like that, what happens with points is it's always 1% of the loan amount. So for those of you who are watching this, who are studying for any states that have any kind of math, keep that in mind when you see discount points or points on your math questions, because what you'll notice is they'll typically say the house sold for X. The down payment was this much. Okay. So can discount points be required? So Brooke asks a great question. Discount points typically will not be required. Okay. However, points could be required. Like you could pay the lender, depending on what type of program that you get into. Okay. Depending on what type of program you're looking to get for your loan that you're about to take out, they might require that you pay a point up front as an origination fee. Okay, that's a very real thing. So I would say that points wouldn't be required as far as ones that are classified as discount points. Okay, but a regular point as an origination fee, yeah, that I could see. That I could see. So to discount the loan is usually optional. Like I said, they usually don't make you, but again, this is what else I'll tell you too. When it comes to the practical side of it, you guys are going to be referring these out to loan officers, to lenders, things like that are going to be able to help you with situations like this. They might have a unique program where it's like, oh yeah, if you pay this discount point, it gets you this kind of thing. There's always like a finagle somewhere, or a way to finesse something. So yeah, keep that in mind too. You're probably not going to ever have to answer that question as far as whether they'll be required or not, but it's something that was a really good question, because they do require points on certain loans, but not discount points. So let's keep going. Let's keep moving. Let's keep grooving. VA loan. What is a VA loan? Right? What is a VA loan? A VA loan is one that we would give to veterans. Now, I'll give you kind of like the potpourri of information with the VA loan. They used to call this the GI loan. Okay, so sometimes you might hear some older folks actually refer to it as a GI loan. Okay, now, question that I have for you, what is the VA's function when it comes to a VA loan? Are they the ones that are lending out the money? Are they the ones that are doing all this kind of stuff? What does the VA do? So if anyone wants to, who's live with me in my classroom, so do they give an approval or an ask? No. So they're not going to be the approving body. So here's what happens. You ready? And you have to understand this as to how financing works, because a lot of people always forget the nuances, or they weren't properly taught the way that financing works. So what happens is this: you go to a lender, and the lender will it's going to be a VA approved lender, right? It's going to be someone who is already pre-approved to give out a VA loan. Okay. So it's going to be a pre-approved lender, and you're going to apply, you're going to put in your qualifications. You're going to say here, I'm applying for a VA loan. And what happens is they would lend you the money. Now, one of the key hallmarks of a VA loan is that you could have 100% financing, meaning you do not have to put anything down. So if you're taking out a VA loan, you don't have to put bubkis down as far as the down payment is concerned. You do not have to put anything out as far as a down payment. And the reason why goes back to the VA's functionality in this. So what happens is this: if someone said to a bank, hey, can you lend this money out to this person right over here, and they don't want to put any money down, the bank would go like this. They go, that would be their official statement. They'd be like, no, we're not doing that. That's crazy talk. Okay. So what happens is the VA steps in and goes, hey, they're with us. We're going to vouch for them. And the bank's like, all right, well, how are you vouching for them? And the VA goes, well, we're going to guarantee the loan. Okay. The VA says, we're going to guarantee the loan. They guarantee it usually up to 50%. So what happens is this: in essence, basically the bank's like, look, Mr. Veteran, Mr. Borrower, because the VA has vouched for you and they're guaranteeing your loan, we don't care. We don't care if you put any money down. That's totally up to you. Ball's in your court. If you would like to, great. If not, don't worry about it, because again, we're covered, because up to 50% of it's going to be covered by the VA. So guys, let me know, did that kind of open up your mind a little bit about what the VA actually does, like how they function? Because that's also similar. So that's and here's the thing: the two key words that I want you to understand, because in FHA loans, the FHA insures it, and in VA loans, the VA guarantees it. Okay, so that's a little bit of the difference. That's why the VA loan gets that 0% down. Okay, that they could just go in there and just be like, yeah, no, 100% financing. So that is, in a nutshell, a VA loan. So speaking of loans, what is a promissory note? What is a promissory note? Anyone who's live with me who wants to talk to me about what a promissory note is, be more than happy to hear it. Also referred to as a note. So authors of the questions might actually refer to these as synonymous. Okay. They are synonyms for one another. Thesaurus information right here. So a promissory note, or a note, is basically, yeah. So someone said, promise to pay back. Yeah. So here's what it is. It's a complicated IOU, right? It's an IOU. So here's what happens when you give a note to someone. So like when you give the note, so here's what the loan process is. Bank gives you the money. Now, listen to what I'm about to tell you. The money is not the mortgage. The money is not the mortgage. Okay. So the bank gives the borrower a loan. Borrower gets the loan, and they go to the bank, and the bank goes, hey, we just gave you a boatload of money. What are you going to give us? And the borrower's like, well, here's this note. And the note is like an IOU. And how IOU is related, and you might laugh at this one, this is the analogy I use. I always say, the IOUs are like the love coupons that my wife gives me on Valentine's Day. Oh, you can have a steak dinner, whatever you want. No. It's like basically, those are the things that you look at, you laugh, you keep it in the drawer, and then you never use it ever in the history of man. So basically, they're just like, the bank looks at your promissory note like, all right, yeah, you're never going to pay me back. Like, that's basically how they treat it. So what they say is hey, we need something to secure this. We need something to make this more valuable. So what happens is that's when one of two instruments come in, either the mortgage or the deed of trust. So depending on what state you're in, if you're on the eastern seaboard or some of the lien theory states, you're probably going to be mortgage. So like my home state is New Jersey. We do mortgages to back the promissory note. And the mortgage is just you saying, here, I'm pledging my property, okay, as repayment for the loan. So basically what happens is the mortgage or the deed of trust secures that promissory note or that note. Does that make sense? And guys, just let me know in the chat if that helped you, because that was a long-winded explanation of what a promissory note is, but I wanted to kind of take you through a little bit of the inner workings of that. Okay, so because that really does, I think that when you fully understand what that instrument does and why we need a mortgage, like I said, you know, I also related to, like, I go out to a bar with my friend JJ, and JJ says to me, yeah, Stu, I'm going to pay you back. And what happens is I'm like, I know for a fact JJ's not paying me back, but that's okay because I know that. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like I take that IOU and I know that it's not worth anything. But like if I did want, let's say it was a big dinner, let's say we did go out to a really expensive meal, then what would happen is I'd be like, all right, JJ, I need something from you. You know, hey, do you have a guitar? Do you have something I could keep as collateral? So what happens is that mortgage or the deed of trust, and again, those are just two instruments to secure the promissory note, are going to be exactly that, you know, just instruments that make the promise to pay back have a little more oomph to it, rather than it just being the love coupon that you get for, you know, free back rub whenever you want it, and then you throw it down in the middle of the dining room table when you're in a heated argument and you're getting bub kisses and my wife's ripping it up. So let's go to the next one, which is an acceleration clause. Acceleration clause. So what is an acceleration clause? And this is going to be found in promissory notes, mortgages, things like that. So what is an acceleration clause? So this gives the lender the capabilities of making the full amount of the loan due upon default. Yeah. So so here we go. Here's a statement in the chat. It says clause that makes the mortgage come due. Yeah, absolutely. But here's the thing. What separates it from like an alienation clause or a due on sale clause is that what triggers it to make the lender able to make it due is that they are the borrower defaults. So the borrower defaults, and once they're in default, the lender can accelerate the loan and say, hey, you owe us all this right now, ahora. Okay, so that's an acceleration clause. And just so you know, to kind of round out that thought, an alienation or a due on sale is going to be a clause that makes it due upon the transfer or sale of the property. So if you transfer it, you sell it, all that kind of stuff, it makes the lender could make it due at that time. So next one, cooperative ownership. Cooperative ownership, also known as co-ops. So guys, what do you think that is? And what I'm going to do is this. Just bear with me 20 seconds because I'm going to take a real quick sip of water. So I'm going to mute my mic for a second so that you guys could type in the chat and tell me, what do you think co-op ownership is? Why don't you type that in the chat? All right. So someone said group ownership. So is it group ownership? So like, here's the thing. So when we have co-op ownership, does a group own it? And that might be a co-op might be a little different than that. So what do I as a co-op owner do? So equal shares in a condo is what Brooke said. So here's what we need to do. And I want to make this super clear. You ready? Co-op ownership or cooperative, same thing, okay? You do not own real estate, no title, no deed. Okay. You do not own real estate in a co-op. You own, so yeah, you got it almost right. Yeah. Board will decide if you can live there and pay large amounts of monthly fees. Yeah. And let me kind of break that down for you so that because there's a lot of correct things in there, but let me shed some context on them because I think that without context, those things just seem like, so let me give some body to it. You ready? But that was a really good, well-rounded, quick answer that you shot out at me. Co-ops, you own shares in a corporation. The corporation usually owns the building or wherever the units are housed. Like if it's a large plot of land and there's multiple homes, like whatever it is, whatever the real property is that is involved, it's owned by a corporation. You own shares in the corporation. The board of directors of the corporation are going to decide who can live there and who cannot live there. So another thing that is common with cooperatives is that there are large fees monthly. And you might think that the monthly fees are large, but because you do not own real estate, you do not have real estate property taxes. Because you do not have real estate property taxes, what they do is they take the gross amount of taxes. Let's say there's 100 units. They'll divide that up by 100, and then each person will pay that portion of the taxes. Okay, come whatever it is, come the first of the month. Okay, so that's what happens. You own shares in a corporation. Another thing that they'll tell you with that is that you have what's called a proprietary lease. So if I have 30 shares in the corporation, that will allow me to have one proprietary lease to a unit. I will have the proprietary lease to unit number 7. So that's the situation there. Next one is chain of title. So type that in the chat. Let me know what you think chain of title is. People usually get this confused with abstract of title. Okay, they usually get it confused with abstract of title. So, and it's hard for people to kind of understand and differentiate the two, but don't you worry, I'm going to help you. So, guys, what do we say that is? What do we say chain of title is? What do we say chain of title is? Okay. So, history of what, Lauren? History of what? Like, give me a little more context to that. History of the ownership. So, what it is this: it's a successive list of the owners. So, listen to what I'm going to tell you. Now, what I need you to do with chain of title is picture a chain. Okay, if you have a chain, if I had a chain link, right? There's links on the chain. Each link is an owner. Links to one, links to another, links to another, links to another, links to another. Okay, so that is a chain of title. And let me just, with the bonus question that I'll ask you, tell me what is abstract of title? What is abstract of title? Okay. Because we have chain of title as the complete list of owners, right? It's a list of ownership of the property. So what is an abstract of title? So if we have the full list of owners, then what's an abstract? And let me give you an idea. Let me give you a hint. Let me help out. So an abstract of title is a list of all things affecting the title to the property. So all things, affecting that. So yeah, a list of mortgages, liens, all those kinds of things. If it affects title, it's going to be on there. So basically, here's what I'll tell you. Abstract of title is more complete, okay, is a more well-rounded idea as to what's going on with the title than the chain of title. However, the chain of title is very important because if there is a break in the chain, that's like major stuff right there. Major stuff. So good on you to know that. And hopefully I cleared up the differences right there. So abstract of title is a brief digest or a history of all things affecting title, like mortgages and liens and encumbrances, things like that. Next one is radon. Radon. What is radon? What is radon? So radon is an environmental hazard, okay? Colorless, odorless, Yeah, so I like that. Gas that comes from the depths of the earth. So it's actually, here's what I'm going to tell you. It's a lot closer to the surface than you actually probably think. And that's why it's harmful to people because so here's what I want you to picture. You ready? So if you ever pictured so I think that everyone has seen how a hot air balloon works, right? There is a balloon and underneath it is a blowtorch. You turn the blowtorch on, it creates all this hot air. Hot air rises, cold air drops. So what happens is this: all that hot air rises, fills up the balloon, and then it's captured within the balloon. The balloon kind of like just encapsulates it. So here's what happens, and this is why people always they ask me questions about this all the time. They go, Stu, if radon gas, it's actually a radioactive, naturally occurring gas, okay, that is in the bedrock of the soil. So basically what happens is this: if you have a basement or something like that, usually that's where there are issues that arise from. Usually if you're just on a slab, the home structure is not puncturing or going into the bedrock. So what happens is typically no issues. However, yeah, you could have a home that has, because it's naturally occurring, you could have a home that has a high level. And what happens is this. So you're picturing that hot air balloon that I told you about. So when we're out in the regular world, you never have any issues that come from radon, okay? Because you're not seeing any kind of concentration levels that will have an effect on you. It dissipates into the air, and you do not breathe it in concentration levels that will be harmful to you. Okay, so just like if I got the torch for a hot air balloon, I turned it on with no balloon, that hot air just dissipates into the air and just naturally does what it's supposed to do. Same thing with radon; it just does naturally what it's supposed to do. But when you put a house on it, that's like putting the balloon over that blowtorch. What happens is basically it now encapsulates whatever gas is there. So you're going to have a higher concentration inside of improvements that go beneath the surface of the earth. So like when you have basements, things like that, even crawl spaces, excuse me, you could have a buildup of radon gas. And what they do is they test for that by cutting open basically a Brita filter and leaving activated charcoal out, and that is what they do. They test, and it is 4.0 picocuries or higher is going to be a concern. And will things like that be on your test? Potentially. Potentially. I've seen it. It's not crazy. As someone who has written tests for a lot of different services, a lot of different authors, I could tell you that is not a totally out there thing. So just keep that in mind too. Like if it comes out of my mouth today, I'm usually not giving you a lot of fluff, and I'm giving you more substance. Okay. So if you're ever asking yourself, that seems really kind of out there, Stu, like, would you ever need that? And here's the thing too, something like that is super practical, because you're going to run into radon and you're going to be testing for it almost at every house. And I recommend to all my clients to test for radon anytime they purchase a home, because the fix is so easy. So that's why I usually mention that. Next one, lead-based paint. Lead-based paint. What is lead-based paint? So we're talking about another one of our environmental issues. And again, this one along with radon are the ones that I see usually the most, and asbestos. Asbestos is another one that I see a lot of questions around. And just so you know, I'll actually talk about asbestos since I'm bringing it up. Asbestos, okay, is a situation that is going to be, because it's like asbestos is an insulator. They treated that stuff. Let me tell you, back in the day, asbestos was Frank's Red Hot of construction. Okay, so if you know the motto of Frank's Red Hot is they put that on everything. So like literally asbestos was basically used in tiling, in siding, in roofing, all those things. So it was basically one of those things that it was just an amazing insulator. But what happens is it has this property. And when I say property, I'm talking about like a characteristic of this substance is that it's friable. So like when you touch it, it crumbles. Think of it like a very, very, very thin potato chip, okay, where you would touch it and all of a sudden it just goes, it becomes airborne, okay, when it does crumble. And if you ingest that into your lungs, that's where there's a lot of health hazards that come with that, okay? So usually to remediate asbestos, if you see it, because it's typically where you see it now, mostly, unless you're in a super old home, it's going to be around the piping, okay? And the best way to remediate asbestos is if you do not disturb it, because think about it, the crumbly potato chip only becomes an issue when it crumbles. So if you don't crumble it, then it's not an issue. So if you ever see that on the test, and I think there is one question on the test that they will tell you, they will ask you, hey, what is the property of asbestos that makes it hazardous? Okay. And they ask you about disturbing it, if it's going to be good, bad, and different, that kind of thing. And then they'll ask you about what's the best way to remediate it. Always encapsulation, because that is zero disturbance. Okay. Every other method disturbs it. So if it's going to disturb it or move it or do anything, bad. If not, good. So lead-based paint. What is lead-based paint? So lead-based paint is the only hazardous material that we actually have legislation for, that we would have to interact with, okay? Legislation that we would have to commonly deal with. So if the home was built in 1978 or prior, the seller is required to give out a lead-based paint disclosure. So, Stu, what if they don't have any knowledge or reports of lead-based paint in the home? That's fine. They have to put that on a disclosure and say, we have no knowledge and no reports of lead-based paint in the home. That's it. They just have to basically say to the confirm to the negative. Say, no, we don't have any of that information about the home. Okay. Then you'd be good to go. Okay. You'd be fine. You'd be good to go. So, lead-based paint, the health hazards with that is ingestion. So if people are eating lead-based paint chips, things like that. But it actually, so people, you're probably sitting there going, oh, adults usually not the problem with that. Yeah, it is. And also another question that I've seen on the test, they ask about how which substance is usually more harmful to children. Lead-based paint is severely harmful to children, more so than adults. So that is one of the indicative health factors with that. So that's something that you have to keep in mind too. So next one, life estate. Okay. What is a life estate? Tell me what that is. Tell me something good. What is a life estate? So life estate is one of our freehold estates. Yeah. So freehold estates being ownership. Okay. And a life estate is ownership that is based on the life of someone or something. And people always ask me, what is that something that it could be based on? Could be based on Fluffy's life, you know, Mr. Snuffleupagus. Okay, you have a Mr. Snuffleupagus in your life. It could be based on Mr. Snuffleupagus, or if that's your pet Chihuahua or whatever the case may be. So you could have it based on the life of a pet, you know, a loved one. It could be based. But if we just say Bob gives Sally a life estate, it's based on Sally's life. So if you ever see that and they give no context, Bob gives Sally a life estate, the life estate is based on Sally's life. That's it. That's the situation there. So the next question that I have for you, very important question. Can you sell a life estate? So let's say Bob gives Sally a life estate. Can Sally sell or lease that life estate? Tell me in the chat if you're live with me. If you're live here, present, experiencing this wonderful webinar. And for those of you who are watching on recording and you're like, hey, I'd love to know where I go to find out the next time you're doing this. Helpmepassmyexam.com, all one word. Helpmepassmyexam.com has a list of all our calendar of events. So Lauren said, no, you cannot sell or lease the property. So Lauren, why do you say that? Just curious why we're saying, hey, we can't lease or sell a life estate. Why can't Sally do that? It's for the life of that person. Okay. But what if they're alive and they want to sell it? Because here's what I'll tell you. The answer is yes, they can. Okay. And people always struggle with this. People always struggle with this because no, they can't, because it's for the life of a person, right? But you could sell that type of interest. Like I could, if you wanted to. Now, here's the two things that people struggle with, right? They struggle with the can and why. So here's what I'm going to tell you. I have a sign in my office. I'm going to tell you what the sign in my office says, and hopefully you laugh. If not, I apologize if I offended you. The sign I have in my office is this. It says, "Stupid people pass the test." Stupid people pass the test. And the reason I have that in there, the reason I speak that mantra, okay, is number one, when you get into the real estate industry, you'll meet many people that you'll go, oh dear God, how did you get to this point? Brooke said I should be fine. So what happens is this. You see so many people in the real estate industry that are like, that you sit there and go, oh my God, how did they pass the test? And the reason why is because they don't think about they don't overthink and overprocess a question. So if I say to you, hey, can you sell a life estate? So here's the thing. Yes, you can. You can sell or lease a life estate, but it's based on the life of someone. Okay, so when that someone dies, the ownership will revert or go to someone in remainder, however the life estate is set up. It's that simple. And you then go, well, why would someone want that? I don't know. I mean, I agree with the statement that why would someone want it? Like, it's not as valuable as fee simple, which doesn't have any kind of limitations on it. But the question wasn't, hey, can you make sense out of someone purchasing this? The question was, hey, what can they do it? So the answer is yes. Okay. The answer is yes. Logistically, you will never sell or lease a life estate. Logistically, you will never see this outside of your real estate exam. So that's the situation there. And I hope I cleared that up for you guys, because I think some of you guys struggle with that. Like I said, the practical side of it. You need to throw some of that out the window. You need to come to the test with as little as possible. And when I say as little as possible, you really do when you're studying. So I'm going to give you a quick study tip. When you're studying, you don't want to come to the table with this whole in-depth knowledge or this in-depth definition of what things are. Okay. You want to have a little version, your own little quick 1 to 2 sentence version of what is this. So remember, I said to you, so I'm going into a little bit more of an in-depth, logic behind some of the questions that you might see, the logic behind why you're struggling with it. So I'm going through a lot of things in the one word, but if you actually go back to what my definition of things are, a life estate is ownership based on the life of someone or something. Okay. It's ownership. So you can lease it, you can sell it. Okay. And I'll tell you a quick story. So we had a Friendsgiving, where you go over to a friend's house for Thanksgiving and all that. And my friend has a 3-year-old. Okay. And, we're teaching her how to set the table, how to be responsible and everything. So I was like, great. I was like, I will participate in the parenting and the teaching the kid how to do things. So I had the brilliant idea of, hey, why don't you go get me a glass of soda? Okay. And she was very excited about this. And so she poured a glass of soda, filled it literally to the brim. And she spilled some on her hands, some went on the floor. And she came to the table, and I'll never forget this. She looks at me, a really, really sharp kid. She said, why was that so hard? I said, well, why'd you fill it to the brim? And she looked at me and she goes, well, I thought that was better. I thought it was better if I filled it all the way to the top. And I said to her, sometimes, coming to the table with a full glass is bad, because you tend to spill it. It makes it more complicated. It makes it harder to actually get to the table. So sometimes having the glass a little less full helps you out. So what should you take from that? Less is more. If I say to you, if you're going through this on replay or you're watching this and you're saying, what is a life estate? And you go, well, it's like when you have a this and then there's a that and then there's a, that's way too much to unpack. Your definition is, my friend's 3-year-old daughter filling the soda glass to the brim. Okay. You don't want that type of definition. You want the ownership based on the life of someone or something. I could easily unpack that and take that and apply it to something, because what happens is in a reading comprehension test, we need to talk about this for a second because this will help you. Reading comprehension test, you need to come to the table with a nice, compact, simple glass, okay? You do not need more information than you come to the table with. So if your definition of something when you see a flashcard is this long convoluted story, here's what's going to happen. You're going to see a scenario on a test. You're going to have this long convoluted story, and you're going to have to try to extrapolate the simple definition out of your example and then go and apply it to the question. And it's not going to work, and you're going to be confused, and your mind's going to melt. And after you do that 15 times, you're going to just sit there and be like, and you're just going to be done. So that's why stupid people pass the test. So I hope you got something out of that. So for those of you who are with me live, let me know if that helped you. Because again, that was a little bit of a winded explanation, but I think that was something a lot of my students need to hear. So with that being said, what is an exclusive right to sell listing? An exclusive right to sell. So why don't you type that in the chat? Let me know what that is. Well, I just take one quick sip. So what do we think? What do we think an exclusive right to sell listing is? So number one, it's exclusive, right? Okay. So there's one brokerage, one agency. So that's an important aspect to it. There's one brokerage, one agency. Okay. And the definition is in the name. The exclusive right to sell it. Meaning that the agency has the exclusive right to sell that listing. No one else could take it from them, no matter what they are going to get paid. This is a listing you want to shoot for all the time. This is the most protective of the brokerage, okay? The brokerage has the most protective and an exclusive right to sell listing, okay? Statute of Frauds. What is Statute of Frauds? What is that? What is that, guys? What is that? Statute of Frauds is a law. And here's the thing. Let me kind of pick this out a little bit, just so that you're aware, you understand. Statute is a law. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, the word statute basically is synonymous with law. So basically, this is law of frauds. Okay, so what do we mean by law of frauds? Basically, it's saying in order for certain contracts to be enforceable, so that we could say that there was no fraud committed, it has to be in writing. So tell me, what are some of those contracts that need to be in writing to be enforceable? Okay, what needs to be in writing to be enforceable? So that would be any lease that is over a year old. So actually, any contract that's going to take over a year to perform, okay, where performance is over a year, that needs to be, but we usually say leases because that's what applies in real law, okay, real property law. You would have leases that are over a year, need to be in writing to be enforceable. So let me ask a question to you guys who are with me live, okay? If you are with me live, if I have a 2-year lease, but it's oral, is it valid? Is it valid? Is it okay if I have this? Okay. Tell me, type in the chats, because this goes to enforceable, unenforceable kind of thing. Okay. Is this something that I can have? I wonder. So here's what I will tell you. You can have a lease for more than a year that is oral. It just cannot be enforced by the court system. So what happens is they also refer to unenforceable contracts as those that are valid amongst parties, meaning, okay, meaning that amongst the parties involved, it is said to be enforceable. Okay, like you could both act on it, right? It's legal amongst parties. Okay, so you're fine to go ahead and do the 2-year lease if it's oral. It's just the court systems. If one person said, "Yeah, nah, I don't want to do this anymore," if one person said that, the courts couldn't get involved and go, no, 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 you have to do that. Nope. They would not get involved. Same thing with a real estate contract sale. So next thing, specific performance. What is specific performance? Okay. It's specific, it's performance. But what is it? What is it? It has specificity, and it's saying that you have to perform. So this is perfect example of this is a lawsuit. This is a lawsuit in which you're suing someone. Usually it's a buyer or seller, okay, that sue for a specific performance. So here's the thing. They'll ask you questions if brokers could sue for specific performance. Nay, they could not. Okay, they could not sue for specific performance. This is only reserved for a buyer and a seller in a real estate contract, where they could say, hey, you're backing out. No, nay, good sir, you cannot back out. I'm going to sue you for specific performance. Now, let me tell you the scenarios which that will be more likely to happen. Okay, like more likely to be successful. A buyer suing a seller for specific performance, much more likely to be successful. Okay. Specific performance, a buyer suing a seller is much more likely to be successful than a seller suing a buyer to force them to buy, because the buyer would have to take out a loan. They typically do not have the money readily available. So that's the kind of situation there. So to force someone, even through court order, could it happen? Has it happened? Yes and yes. Is it likely? No. And that's sometimes a question that you'll see on some state tests, where they'll ask you who is more likely to win a specific performance suit. And that would much more likely be the buyer rather than the seller. Okay. Implied contract. Implied contract. So what is an implied contract? What is that? Could you give me an example of an implied contract if you're live with me? If you're live, ready to jive. So, an implied contract is one in which it is understood through one's actions. What do you mean by that, Stu? So, there's two types of contracts. There is expressed contracts or express contracts and implied contracts. So watch this. If I said to you, I will sell you my guitar for $300, that is an express contract, whether we put it in writing or not. Or we don't need to put it in writing. We could just say it, okay? It's express, meaning that the terms are clearly defined. An implied contract is one in which it is understood through the actions of each party, right? So, Stu, what's a good example of an implied contract? Great question. That is when I go to sit down at a restaurant and I go, I would like the 8-ounce filet mignon. That's what I want. Then it is implied that they will bring it out, serve it to me. I will eat it. It will be delicious. And then I will pay for it. Okay. So that is what an implied contract is. Through your actions of sitting down at the restaurant saying, give me my filet mignon. Okay. You are implying that you understand the contract that you're engaging in. When I go to 7-Eleven and I get the delicious macaroons, if you haven't had a 7-Eleven macaroon, I don't know what you're doing with your life. You need to do that right now. Uh, you go get a 7-Eleven macaroon, and you bring it up to the counter. You know, you have your arms folded in them because you stack your arms because Stu said, "Oh, they're delicious." You go to the counter, you drop them on the counter, and then they say to you, $23, my good friend. That is an implied contract. I go up there. I don't need to walk into the store and have them explain to me how things work. My actions of going into the store, picking up all the macaroons that are in the refrigerated section at 7-Eleven, wrapping them in my arms and put them on the counter. I am entering into that contract based on my actions. That is an implied contract. So let's keep going. What is an open listing? What is an open listing? Okay. Anyone who's live with me, ready to jive, tell me if you know what an open listing is. What is that? What is an open listing? It is. So here's the thing. I'm going to take you back to a blast in time. Okay. What it is this. It's multiple listing agents, meaning it's basically what I refer to as the floozy listing. That's what I do. I call it the floozy. Okay. I say that the floozy listing is an open listing. Any listing agent could come and sell it. It's similar to, so let me ask you this. Is an open listing a unilateral or a bilateral contract? Is an open listing a unilateral or a bilateral contract? Type in the chat. Let me know if you know. Is it unilateral or bilateral? So this one is unilateral, meaning that it's binding to only one party. Who's the party that it's binding to? Unilateral contracts are always binding to the one that is giving the contract. So the option or gives, EE receives. In this, an open listing is basically an option listing. You could choose to sell it, you could choose to procure a buyer, or you could choose not to. That decision is completely and entirely up to you, my good friend. That is entirely and completely up to you how you would like to handle it. But what I will say is that is an open listing. So hope you understand that, you get that in your head, and that works out. So let's go to the next one. Next one, net listing. What is a net listing? What is a net listing? So this also, key to this one is this is not legal in every single state. Not every single state has this as legal. Yeah, someone said illegal. So if you are in a state where this is illegal, which is a majority of them, that is 100% accurate, saying that it is illegal. So what is it? So we've identified that it is illegal in most states, but we haven't identified what it is. Like, seller sets the minimum price. So the seller sets the minimum price on all of them. Here's what it is. The commission is based off of what the seller nets. So the seller says, I just want a net. And so the difference between gross and net in this example, gross is the whole. Okay. Net is basically after any kind of, what you walk away with, right? So if I said I grossed $200,000 in sales, but my net sales were $100,000, you would know that I had $100,000 in expenses. Okay. So that is the situation there. So the seller says, hey, I want to net 200,000. Anything above that, you keep. So that is an illegal listing in most states, and it would be classified as a net listing, a seller net listing. So what is a license, guys? What is a license? And what we're talking about with licenses is we're probably talking about licenses and easements and that kind of thing. So what do you think a license is? So, yeah, so temporary usage. So I like that. So let me give you a perfect example. Okay. So my neighbor said to me, hey, Stu, I'm buying a snowblower this season. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. He's like, yeah, but I don't have anywhere I could put it. And I said, oh, that's a bummer. I was like, And I said to him, I said, well, where are you going to put it? He said, well, I was hoping to put it in your garage, maybe. He's like, I know you have a ton of space. He's like, if I put it in your garage, would that be all right if I did that? And if it snows, I'll obviously have to bring it out. So I'll snowblow your driveway. I was like, yeah, awesome. I didn't even have to run it by my wife. I was like, go ahead, knock yourself out. He has a license. He has a license to use my garage. Okay. He has a license to use my garage. So that is an example of a license. So now that we spoke about a license, what is an easement? What is an easement? So we said a license is a revocable right to use a property, right? So what is an easement? So if that's a revocable right to use a property, an easement's going to be a little different than that. Okay. And here's the thing, you're probably going to get questions on the test that are going to be around this, that are going to be around knowing and understanding the differences between a license and an easement. That's one of the test writers' favorite questions. They always love talking about the difference between a license and an easement. So what do you guys think is the difference between a license and a easement? Okay. Easement is a permanent right to use a property. It is said to be appurtenant. So now there are easements that we do refer to as easement appurtenant, because here's what happens. There's several classifications of easements. There is an easement by necessity. Okay. And when we say by necessity, it's an easement, the permanent right to use a property, that is gained through there being a necessity. What is a necessity? A necessity would be usually like a landlocked property, and you need to have ingress and egress. Stu, you're throwing a lot of vocab words at us. What is ingress and egress? That is access into the property is ingress, access out of the property is egress. So ingress and egress are two things that are necessary when it comes to owning a property. So that's the situation there. Ingress and egress is what is needed, okay, in regards to owning a property. And if you do not have that, you are probably going to have an easement by necessity to access someone else's property. And then the other ones are gross easements, which are usually your utility companies, okay? Then there's easements by prescription, which are gained through prescriptive measures. So whatever you meeting the prescriptive period of time of usage, okay, means that you could go and apply for an easement by prescription. Okay. And then one that we just don't classify as anything is an easement appurtenant, because that's usually, maybe it's been there since the beginning of the property's ownership. We don't know. Maybe it was created through a voluntary agreement between the two parties. Not sure. Okay. So that is what an easement is. Next one, accretion. Accretion. So what is accretion? What is that? What is that? And I'll tell you how I like my cheat with that. Okay. My cheat with that is, if you jumble up the letters, it looks like creation. If you jumble up the letters a little bit, maybe take out one of the C's. Okay. It looks like creation. Okay. Meaning that it is creating new land through means of water, air, wind, stuff like that. Okay. So there's deposit of alluvial sediment that comes onto the property. It's the opposite. Okay. The opposite of erosion. Okay. So if you know what erosion is, then you'll know what accretion is. Accretion is the opposite of erosion. Erosion is a gradual depletion or taking away of land. Okay. And and what was I going to say? And then accretion is the creation of it. So let's look at the next one. This one's a great one. What are the essential elements of a valid contract? So who has the essential elements of a contract? Who knows what that is? As I take a 5-second sippy break, because my mouth is getting dry. This is tough to go 2 hours like this. Hold on 1 second, guys. Type in the chat what you think the essential elements of a contract are if you're live with me. All right. So the essential elements of a contract, CLOC. So it's clock without a K. Clock without a K. That's how we figure out the essential elements of a contract. We need to have consideration, offer and acceptance, legal object, okay, and competent parties. Now, let me explain competent parties. What I mean by competent parties is, are they legally competent to give consent? Are they legally competent to give consent to this, right? Can they do that? Yes, no, maybe so. I don't know. So that is something that I will tell you is very, very important in regards to the competency of the individual. Are they legally competent to give consent at any time? Okay, because if you're under duress or you're temporarily inebriated, okay, the contract's just going to be voidable. Okay, it's going to be voidable because at some point you could come to it and say, oh man, I didn't want to do that, I didn't mean to do that, so I'm going to void that. Yeah, no, that's not happening. Okay. That's why we say that a contract that with someone who's under duress in a temporary state of, they're not with it. Okay. Like I said, they're inebriated in some manner, shape, or form. That's different than legally incompetent. Okay. Someone who's declared by like the courts to be legally incompetent, okay, could never give consent. Okay. Can never, ever give consent. So here's the thing. You have Stu, regular old Stu. I'm totally competent. I'm with it. Okay. My wife might state otherwise, but I'm totally with it. And I could give consent to anything I would like to. Okay. What I will tell you is this, though. If I'm inebriated, I have a temporary lapse. Or if I'm under duress, right, that would be temporary. And those would all be situations where the competency would be still there, but it's just temporarily not with me. So that's why they say that that contract is voidable. Now, you have to have offer and acceptance, which is meeting of the minds. They might refer to it as that. So some of your instructors, some of your testing material might say a meeting of the minds. Totally fine with that. Okay. You have to have legality. Yes. You can't sit there and say, hey, I'd like to, buy 5 cartons of, I'd like to buy 5 pounds of crack cocaine from you. No. Illegal. Okay. Can't do that. No, sirree, Bob. So that's the situation there. Okay. And consideration, just so you know, could be good or valuable. So good would be, if we offered up, if we offered up some sort of, love and affection, something like that would be good. Good or valuable. Valuable is anything of value. A guitar, a Michael Jordan rookie card, a money. Okay. Note, a promise to repay. That would be it. So, constructive eviction. What is constructive eviction? What is constructive eviction, guys? So this is, some people refer to this as a reverse eviction. Okay. They say it's like the opposite of an actual eviction. And constructive eviction is when the warranty of habitability has been breached by the landlord. So the landlord has said, hey, I'm not turning the heat on for the winter. Constructive eviction. Okay. The warranty of habitability has been broken by the landlord. So the landlord breaks it and the tenant goes, I'm constructively evicting myself because you have broken the warranty of habitability. You don't get the roach problem fixed. You don't put on the heat in the winter, something like that. Those are all reasons why a tenant could constructively evict themselves. What about hypothecation? What is hypothecation? What is that? What is hypothecation? This has to do with financing, guys. So this is another finance question. Great one. So remember the situation that I told you earlier where we were talking about the mortgage, the loan, the note. Okay, so the mortgage, okay, the mortgage, which is the pledge of real property without giving up possession. So basically, someone saying, hey, I'm not giving you my property, but here's a mortgage where you're basically going to be using it as collateral for the repayment of a loan. It's securing the note. Hypothecation is the process of giving that mortgage to the bank. So giving of the mortgage to the bank is hypothecation. Hypothecation, to hypothecate. Okay. So let's go to the next one. An appraiser. What is an appraiser? So guys, what is an appraiser? What is an appraiser? What is that? So that is someone who is going to give an estimate or an opinion of value on a piece of property. So an appraiser is someone who's going to give an estimate or an appraisal on the estimate of value through analysis on a piece of property. Okay. So you're going to run into a situation where an appraiser is just that. There's someone who is just going to give an opinion of value on a property. So next one, what is a BPO? What is a BPO? What does it stand for? So like I said, if you're live with me, what does a BPO stand for? Bachman Pooch Overdrive? Making up bad jokes now. That's how you know it's getting late in the night. So BPO is a broker's price opinion. So a broker's price opinion, what is a broker's price opinion? Okay. So a broker's price opinion, just so you know, is a situation where the broker is basically giving a glorified CMA. Okay. They're giving a CMA and they're like, yeah, you know, here's a CMA, but they're usually giving it to a bank for a fee. So they're usually sitting there going, oh man, here's a CMA and you have to pay me for it. That's usually what a broker's price opinion is. And it's so that the bank doesn't need to use an appraisal in every single circumstance that they would have to find out the value of a home. So like, Stu, what are some scenarios that they would have to find out the value of a home, but wouldn't use an appraisal? Like, that sounds cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So a couple scenarios in which they would be using a appraisal or would need the value of a home, okay, but wouldn't use an appraisal would be like, let's say they have a piece of property that they're looking to sell because they have a situation where they actually, foreclosed on the property. Okay, so here it is. They foreclosed on a property. Okay, then what happens is they're going to sit there and say, okay, we're foreclosing on this. Okay, we're foreclosing on this and we need to sell it. So they don't need an appraisal. They don't need a super official one. They just need an idea as to how much the property is going for based on other comps. So what they do, and this became very popular in 2008 in the financial crisis, what they basically do is pay a broker to do a BPO and they would get paid a fraction of what an appraisal is, because here's the thing, they can't call BPO an appraisal, but it is just an estimate of value. Okay, it's just not one that will ever be referred to as an appraisal. So next one, this is super important. What's steering? What is steering, guys? This is one of our fair housing things. Okay, so steering is channeling a buyer or directing them to or away from a certain area based on them belonging to a protected class. So let's say that I was like, oh, you're Hispanic, here, let me show you some homes in this Hispanic neighborhood. Or, oh, you're Italian Roman Catholic, let me show you this Italian neighborhood that you would really like. Okay, those are all examples of steering. Okay, those are all examples of steering, and it is illegal. Okay, it is super illegal. So what is interest, guys? What is interest? tell me if you're live with me in chat. Tell me, what do you think interest is? Want to take a stab at it? Anybody? Anybody want to take a stab at it? I know what's happening right now is this. We're getting close to, I'm recording this during the holidays. We're getting people that are probably hopped up on sugar cookie and candy canes. Okay. So Tracy said the amount you pay to borrow money. Absolutely. Basically, so here's how I treat it, right? I treat interest as rent on money. Okay. It's rent for using other people's money. Okay. So if you have to, basically, here's the thing. If I give you money, you have to pay rent on that. Okay. You can't just get it and say, thank you so much, Stu. That was really generous of you. No, I want my interest. I want my interest payments. So that is the situation there. So interest is rent on using other people's money, right? Makes sense? I hope it does. I hope it makes sense for you guys. So next one, let's take a look at the next one. We spoke about this, an FHA loan, an FHA loan. So what is an FHA loan? Because we spoke about a VA loan, right? We spoke about a VA loan. So what is an FHA loan? So the VA loan, we said, was a situation where you're going to get a loan that's guaranteed. The VA loan is guaranteed by the VA. So what does the FHA do, right? So it's insured by the Federal Housing Administration, right? So, and a lot of people also confuse this with fair housing, right? So the FHA insures the loan. Now, yeah, here's what happens. So what happens is someone comes up and says, hey, I'd like to borrow money. And maybe they don't have a lot of money, or maybe they're in a situation where they don't want to go ahead and and pay as much as maybe another type of loan. Okay. And here's the thing. Traditionally, FHA loans have been for people who do not have a lot of money, or do not have as high a credit score. But I will tell you this now, there are certain FHA programs that are super appealing, super appealing. Like I could probably get an FHA loan right now and pay less in interest than if I got a conventional loan. Crazy. I just locked in an FHA the other day for one of my clients. I think it was like 2.8%. Insane prices, insane interest rates right now. There's something crazy like that. So FHA, now let me ask you another question. You ready, guys? So FHA insures the loan, okay? FHA insures the loan. Now, my question to you is this. If the FHA insures the loan, does a borrower have to pay mortgage insurance? Does a borrower have to pay mortgage insurance? Okay, great question. So a borrower does have to pay mortgage insurance. They do have to still pay mortgage insurance, even though the FHA is insuring it. Let me ask you this question. You ready? This is complicated. Who do they pay the insurance to? So they're paying, and so here's the thing, and also the name of the insurance. Do we know what the name of the insurance is? Okay. So conventional loans, we have private mortgage insurance. So what is it for a FHA loan? What is it for an FHA loan? So if it wasn't confusing enough that conventional loans have PMI, an FHA loan has MIP, or mortgage insurance premium. Okay. Mortgage insurance premium is one that is going to be paid to the FHA. Okay. So the FHA is paid the mortgage insurance premium, and it's basically how they run their business, because they go to the banks and they say, hey, look, we'll vouch for this person. Okay. We'll insure that loan. And then what happens is the borrower then in turn pays insurance to the FHA. So let me ask you this. Let's get to the next one. What is an amortized loan? What do I mean by an amortized loan? What does it mean to amortize? So the word amortize, I'll give you a little Latin lesson. You ready? Morte means death. So amortize means to slowly kill off, basically to slowly kill something off. So a amortized loan is one that's going to be slowly killed off over time. Now, the question is it going to be fully amortized or is it going to be partially amortized? So if it has a balloon payment at the end, like a lump sum that you would owe, okay, if it has a balloon payment at the end, it is going to be what we refer to as a partially amortized loan, meaning that it has been partially killed off, but there's still a little life left in it, okay? The fully amortized loan will have no other payments that have to be made to it, okay, after that final payment. Final payment made, done, done, and done. Nothing else you need to know about that. So let's keep it moving. Let's keep it grooving, okay? So we have P-I-T-I. P-I-T-I. What does it mean to you? Hey, Stu, what does it mean to me? P-I-T-I. P-I-T-I is an abbreviation. It stands for principal, interest, tax, and insurance. P-I-T-I means principal, interest, tax, and insurance. And what is that? So on an amortization chart or an amortization table, you're going to see that it shows you principal and interest. It shows you principal and interest payments, okay, per $1,000 of a loan. For those of you who have math that you're trying to say, hey, what is this going to be? What is this going to be? So principal and interest is going to be the amortization table, shows you all principal and interest. Then you have tax and insurance. So if I said to you, hey, I want to figure out what the principal, interest, tax, and insurance payments are for something, okay, what would happen is you would have to take into consideration basically the taxes and insurance. And keep in mind, too, if you're doing math of any sort, something that's super important is you make sure that you understand, are they asking me this question in months and then they need me to go into years? Are they asking in years and then they have to have me go into months? Be careful and cognizant. And this goes for this goes for all the questions. If you have a question that is being asked of you, what you need to do is make sure you understand what it is that you're being asked. If you don't understand what you're being asked, you can't answer it. So what is a net lease? What is a net lease, guys? What is that? So a net lease, is that like a net listing? Is it illegal? Okay. A net lease, also sometimes referred to as a triple net. Okay. And here's the thing. You don't need to know the terrible nuances of what each one is because there's actually a 7 net lease. You don't need to know that for the test. Okay. You don't need to know that. A net lease is one in which the tenant pays all the expenses. So you're talking taxes, insurance, maintenance, stuff like that. So as I take a sip of water, let me ask you this question. This is a good one. You ready? Why would a tenant want a net lease? Why would a tenant want a net lease? Type that into the chat. So why would a tenant want to pay all their landlord's expenses? So I'll tell you why. If you look at any big box retailer like Best Buy, CVS, Walmart, Target, stuff like that, they all have what is referred to as net leases. They insist on them. Why? because they want all the benefits. They want all the benefits of ownership, okay? They want all the benefits of ownership without having to own the property. So they want all the benefits of ownership without having to own the property. Makes sense, right? Like, so Best Buy is like, hey, we don't want to own the property, but we want all the tax write-offs, right? We want all the tax write-offs. So that's why you have net leases, okay? So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. So let's look at this one. What's a tenancy at sufferance? What's a tenancy at sufferance? That's one of our less than freehold estates, okay? This is the total opposite of a freehold of a fee simple estate. Okay, so it's total opposite. Fee simple, highest form of ownership that you could have in real property. Okay, highest form of ownership you could have in real property. Tenancy at sufferance is a less than freehold interest that you have in the property, and it's when you're staying past a legal lease. Okay, you're staying past a legal lease without the permission of the landlord. So the landlord is suffering. That's what I always say. I say the landlord is suffering in that situation. A tenancy at sufferance. So let's go to this one. What is the lessor? Remember, in all of your ORs, and EE situations, OR gives, EE receives. Always remember that. Okay? And here's the thing. A lot of people always say, Stu, it's different in a mortgage. It is not. Nay, nay, I say to you. Nay, nay. Because the person who gives the mortgagor, is the borrower. Because the mortgage is the pledge of real property for securing the note, right? We learned that today. We reiterated. We made sure that we have an understanding of that. So what happens is the money, the loan, is not the mortgage. If the loan was the mortgage, then guess what? The bank would be the mortgagor. The bank is not. Okay, so the lessor, OR, gives the less than freehold estate to the lessee. OR gives, that would be the landlord. Correct, 100%. That is the landlord. Next one, periodic estate. What is a periodic estate? It's periodic, right? What is a periodic estate? What is that? What is a periodic estate? So this is a less than freehold estate, okay? This is a less than freehold estate that is said to be from period to period. So the most famous of the periodic estates is a month-to-month lease. There is no end date. If there was an end date, what would it be if there was an end date? What would it be? What would it be called if there was an end date? Be called an estate for years. If there's an end date, we're going to call it an estate for years. If there's no end date in sight, we refer to that as a periodic estate, okay? It goes from period to period. So it could be week to week. It could be month to month, which is the most common. It could be even from year to year. You never know. So next one, constructive notice. Constructive notice. What is constructive notice? So we would have to know the difference between constructive notice and actual notice. So what is the difference between constructive and actual notice? Anyone want to take a stab at it that's with me live? If you want to say, hey, I know what constructive notice is. So this is one where I'll give you an example. Constructive notice is when you're giving notice to the world. You're like, I have this. I own this. Okay. So when you record a deed, it is said that you are giving constructive notice to the world. You're basically saying, hey, world, I have a deed to this property. Okay. And that's exactly what you're doing with constructive notice. You're saying, I own said property. Done. Okay. So constructive notice. Let's say I said to you, hey guys, I'm wearing a gray shirt today. You now have actual notice that I'm wearing a gray shirt, whether you wanted that information or not. Okay. I am telling you. So I have a gray shirt on. You now have actual notice, because actual notice is direct. It's either you have knowledge orally, verbally, written, whatever the case may be, because it could be something sent in an email or a text message, something like that. That could be actual notice. Constructive notice, again, would be me putting on Twitter, I'm wearing a gray shirt. You could, let's say 30 years from now, you're like, I wonder what Stu was wearing on December 21st, 2020. I wonder. So you would then see, you would go to my Twitter account and you would say, oh, Stu is wearing a gray shirt. Thank God. All is well in the world right now. So let's take a look at the next one. This one's great. What is a quitclaim deed? So let me ask you this question. What is a deed? You know, because we haven't really gone over that. What is a deed? What does a deed do? You know, I was just telling you, hey, you know, if you record your deed, you're giving constructive notice to the world. Okay. I don't think that any of you on the chat right now are interested in my beach house in New Jersey. Okay. But what happens is this. If you were, okay, if you were at some point interested, you could just basically go down to the county records and say, oh, there it is. Boom, done. So a deed transfers title interest. Okay. So if you have interest in a property, okay, if you have interest in a property, it would be transferred via deed. Okay. So a quitclaim deed is going to be one in which you basically are saying, I am making no express warranties about this deed. I'm not saying I own it or that or that I'm going to guarantee it against anything. And I being whatever the property owner is, or whatever the title interest owner is, or whoever's giving the deed, okay, the grantor. So let me tell you something crazy that I could do. So Lauren, I'll pick on you. I could give you a quitclaim deed to Bruce Springsteen's house. What does that mean? What does that mean? Does that mean that you magically own Bruce Springsteen's house? Okay, my jersey's coming out. I'm mentioning the boss. So that doesn't mean, Lauren, that you own Bruce Springsteen's house. What that means that you have, okay, you have whatever interest Stu had in Bruce Springsteen's house at the time that I signed the deed over to you. So basically I'm saying, hey, I don't know what it is. And when you would use this is typically clerical. This is typically a situation that it's purely between family members, or it's a situation that is purely going to be clerical. Clears clouds and title. Like if there's someone that's a question on the deed, you know, what they'll do is they'll ask someone to sign a quitclaim deed over to clear any clouds and title. Of course, if it's amicable. If not, you're up Poops Creek. So next one, joint tenants. Joint tenants. What is joint tenants? What is that? So joint tenants is going to be a way in which more than one person could take title to a property. Meaning, okay, if me and Tracy were buying a property, we could buy it as joint tenants if we meet the requirements, which are the 4 unities. Okay, the 4 unities that are required for joint tenancy, and those are the unity of time, title, interest, and possession. So the unity of time means that at the same time you are taking the property. Unity of interest means that all interests are unified, okay, and that they do not deviate from the unification. So what that means is this, okay, that you're all unified in regards to how much you have. So if I have 25%, you have 25%, someone else has 25%, another person has 25%, all shares equal, okay? And then you have the unity of title, means that everyone takes it on the same title. So everyone has come into the property on the same title. So if you've come into it on a different title, you are not entitled to be joint tenants. So let me ask you this question, okay? Can we have multiple different ways that title is taken on a property? Can we have that? Can we have some people as joint tenants, some people as tenants in common? Okay. Some people as joint tenants, some people as tenants in common. Let me know in the chat if you guys think that we can have that. Okay. So Tracy said no. So watch this, Tracy. I'm going to ask you a question. Okay. A, B, and C own a property as joint tenants. C sells their interest to D. So now A, B, and D own the property. How do they all own the property? I'm going to tell you, it's not going to be all as joint tenants. They're all going to own it. So A and B will have their joint tenancy still intact. Okay. 100% still intact. Okay. A and B are still joint tenants. And what's the benefit? What's the reason why we would want to be joint tenants? So the reason why you would want to be joint tenants ever is to take advantage of what's called the right of survivorship. The right of survivorship basically means that you have, when one of the individuals passes away who is a joint tenant, their ownership dissolves into the other joint tenants. So in this situation, A and B would be joint tenants, and A, B, and D would be tenants in common. So D is tenants in common with A and B, okay? But A and B, unless they were to do something, they have their joint tenancy, okay? Their joint tenancy is going to be something that is going to still be intact. Does that make sense? So let me know in the chat if you're with me on that. You're like, oh man, I learned something. I knew I was going to learn something. Okay. So yeah, I mean, so that's, and here's the thing, that's the reason I focus on that is because that's a common scenario that you could get where they'll jumble up the different types of tenancy, the different types of stuff that you'll have there. So that's super important for you guys to know, I think, in my opinion. However, let's talk about this. What is the rectangular survey system? So what is the rectangular survey system? It's also called something else. It has another name. It has another name, okay? What would that other name be for this? They call it the rectangular survey system, or they call it the government survey system, rectangular survey or government survey system, okay? The rectangular survey or government survey system. So here's what happened. In 1775, when we had our westward expansion, so if you notice something, the original 13 colonies, okay, and the eastern seaboard states, okay, the ones that are all on the east, basically what happens is they would come into a situation where they would all come in. And if you look at their western borders, the western borders of the eastern seaboard states and the colonies look like a 2-year-old drew them with a crayon. Okay. They're just all over the place. And that has to do with there's a lot of reasons behind that. Has to basically do with colonizing, things like that, and blah, blah, blah. So we basically were kind of like running roughshod, and we used a system called a meets and bounds system primarily. The meets and bounds system was short for meters and boundaries. So, and we took that from UK, okay, from Britain. So we took that from Britain when we colonized. Then what happens is this. Now, when they were pushing out west, they were like, look, we have to get a system where there's going to be more unification. It's going to look a lot neater, and it's going to be easier to identify properties. So they came up with a system that basically breaks everything down to a grid. And the grid consists of townships. The townships are broken down into 36 sections. Each section is 1 square mile. So each township is 36 square miles. As far as the general knowledge that you need to know, that's it. Also, you just need to know that the prime meridian line is the main line that runs north to south, okay, in the government survey system. And the one that runs east to west is going to be the baseline. So you have prime meridian runs up and down or north and south. East and west, you will have a baseline. So those are the important things to remember when you're talking about the government survey system. So next one, the grantor. Who is the grantor? Who is the grantor? So a grantor is someone that we would refer to in a deed. Okay, grantor is going to be referred to in a deed. So we identified already what a deed is. Okay, what we need to do here is figure out who the grantor is. So the grantor, remember, said it a couple times already. The OR gives, the EE receives. Okay, the grantor is giving their interest in a deed. The grantor is giving their interest in a deed. Make sense? So that is who the grantor is. Next one, plottage. Plottage. What is plottage? What is plottage? So plottage is this. Plottage is 1 and 1 equals 3. Okay. So plottage is a situation where when you combine two properties, okay, when you combine two properties, the sum of the whole is greater than what the parts are that make it up. So let me give you an example. I have a deli. Lauren has a parking lot. We both own them separately, but now we combine forces into a parking lot deli. And now Lauren's $10,000 parking lot and my $10,000 deli is now a $30,000 deli and parking lot. So what happens is we effectively have increased the incremental value of each of the separate parts that make it up. So plottage is 1 + 1 equals 3. Always remember that. Bill of sale. Bill of sale. Bill of sale. What is a bill of sale? What is a bill of sale? This is how we transfer ownership of tchotchkes. Okay. This is how we transfer ownership of personal property. Okay. Personal property is transferred through what we refer to as a bill of sale. Okay. Bill of sale is going to be exactly what transfers personal property. So if personal property is ever included in a real estate sales contract, it could be. But if you want to be extra super special, you would type up a bill of sale as well. So next one, eminent domain. What is eminent domain? What is that? That's one of our government powers. So type that in the chat if you're with me live. What is eminent domain? One of those government powers. And this is one that's sometimes controversial too. So eminent domain is when the government takes private property, okay, and they have to compensate you for it, okay? They take private property for a higher and greater public use, okay? So they take it for a higher and greater public use. That is what eminent domain is, okay? Eminent domain is when they take your property for a higher and greater public use and they compensate you for it, okay? That would be eminent domain. So now eminent domain is the law. What is the process by which the government exercises eminent domain? So what is the process by which the government exercises their right of eminent domain? begins with a C. Think about it this way. It would be condemnation. Condemnation. You're condemning the property. That is your right to do as the government by the law of eminent domain. Next one, escheat. Escheat. What does it mean to escheat a property? What happens when a property is escheated? So how I remember this is another government power. Okay? This is another government power. Escheat is when the state cheats you. Okay? The state cheats you out of your home. When would they cheat you out of your home? They would cheat you out of your home when you die, okay? When you die and you have no will, okay? So you die intestate. You have no will and no known heirs. So basically what happens is this. You die alone. Nobody has anything. No one knows. The property would escheat to the state, and it's always the state level. Okay, always the state level. So that's why how I always remember it is I take out the E. Okay, I take out the E. I just see S cheats, meaning the state cheats you. Okay, next one, variance. What is a variance? What is a variance? What is that? So let me explain what a variance is. A variance is an exception to zoning. And typically it has to do with setback lines and where you could build structures and things of that nature. Okay. So a variance is not going to be, so people always refer to kind of get them confused with the non-conforming use, right? Okay. So they usually get them confused with that non-conforming use. A non-conforming use is one in which the property no longer conforms to whatever the zoning regulations are. Okay, that means that they basically let them. They're like, look, you can use this property and continue to use it for whatever you were using it for. Okay. So if it was a residential property and they've now changed the zoning to commercial, they're like, hey, you could still continue to use it for residential purposes. Okay. You don't have to change it to commercial. So I don't have to change my house to a KFC. I don't like that, but I don't have to change it to a KFC. So next one, proprietary lease. We spoke about this earlier. When did we speak about a proprietary lease though? Because it's been a while since we spoke about this. So what did we say? When would you get a proprietary lease? In what situation? It was one of our first questions that we did, one of our first flashcards, and that was going to be in a situation where not necessarily special use of a property, but I like the effort there. It's going to be you get a proprietary lease when you have co-op ownership. So you own shares in a corporation, right? You own shares in a corporation, then based on how many shares you have would give you a proprietary lease in the property. Okay. Would give you a proprietary lease in the property. So that is the situation there. Next one, devisee. So who's a devisee? What is a devisee? So what does it mean to devise a property? So remember, we know that OR gives, EE receives. So what does it mean to devise a property? That means to leave via will. Okay. You're willing the real property to someone. You're saying, here you go. I'm going to leave this to you. Okay. This is yours. Okay. Upon my death, this is yours. All right. That is a devise. So what do you think a devisee is? If we said OR gives, EE receives, a devisee is going to be someone who receives a devise. So someone who received real property via a will, that would be a devisee. Okay. A devisee would be that of someone who is receiving it. Okay. Makes sense? Good stuff. Good to go. What's a condominium? This one we get confused with co-op. We got a little confused with co-op. So condominium is, do you own real property in a condominium? Let me ask you that question. I think that's something that I really would like to know. In a condominium ownership, do I own real property? Yeah. So when you own a condominium, you're basically in a development where you have where there's basically shared elements. So there's things called common elements, okay, which are going to be owned basically by everybody. Okay. So you own a percentage. When you own a condominium, you own a percentage of the common elements. Okay. So that's usually the pool, the tennis court if they have one, the the clubhouse if there is one, stuff like that. Also, what happens is you typically don't own the exterior of the property. So you own interior wall to interior wall. So you don't own any type of exterior typically. There are some where you would be responsible for that. It would be yours. That's the situation. But for the most part, it's going to be your homeowners association's responsibility because they manage what is referred to as the common elements, right? Like the things that we were talking about before. So that's condominium ownership. There's common elements. There's an HOA. Okay. You have to pay HOA dues. Okay. Because that's how they pay for the maintenance, the upkeep, and any kind of repairs that have to be done to any of the common elements. Also, along with like the roofing, things like that, siding, stuff like that. Okay. The cleaning, maintenance, and repair of any of those items. So, next one, voluntary lien. We were talking earlier about the difference between general and specific. Now let's talk about the difference between a voluntary lien and that of an involuntary lien. So voluntary lien versus an involuntary lien. So the situation is this. A voluntary lien is one in which it is totally up to you. It is voluntary. Okay. It is voluntary that you have that type of lien on the property, that you put that. So a mortgage lien would be something of a voluntary nature. An involuntary lien would be that of like taxes, a judgment, mechanics lien, all involuntary, all things that you don't necessarily sign up for. So next one, power of attorney. So what is power of attorney? What is power of attorney? So power of attorney is this. It is when you have a situation where you are basically an agent for someone and you represent them in all matters, okay? In all situations, you basically represent them. You're running into a situation where you are going to represent or work on behalf of them for everything. So you could pick up prescription medication for them. You could lease their house. You could buy a car for them. You have total as the agent, okay? Or what they would refer to as the attorney in fact, okay? That's what, because your power of attorney is given to you, and that makes you an attorney in fact, okay? For that person, for that individual. So that is the situation there. Let's go to, let's go to remainder man. What is remainder man? What is a remainder man? And we spoke about this a little bit in life estates. So here's what a remainder man is. You ready? A remainder man is someone who is identified as a third party. Okay. So what happens is they get the property. Okay. If someone is identifying them as the person they want the property to go to upon someone's death. Like, let's say in the original example, I said Bob gave Sally a life estate, right? And if it went to someone else, okay, at the death of Sally, that person would be a remainder man, okay? So what happens is they have an interest which could be referred to as a remainder interest. So a remainder man is just someone who's a third party that's been identified in typically a life estate scenario where it says, hey, upon your death, life tenant, okay, the property is going to go to Chris instead of back to me, back to Stu. Okay, because I don't want the property. I don't want to have anything to do with it. So I'm not going to touch it. I'm not going to be, dealing with it whatsoever. So what is a dominant estate? What is a dominant estate? Do we know what a dominant estate is? I think we spoke about this earlier. I don't know that we definitely went into what a dominant estate was and a servient estate. So they also sometimes, some authors keep this in mind. Some authors use different wording, okay? Some authors use different wording. So they might use dominant tenement. They might use servient tenement, okay? Keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. So the dominant is benefiting, okay? The dominant is benefiting, and the servient is serving the easement. So the servient is the one whose property is being used. They're serving the easement. The dominant one is the controlling one, is the one that has the power to do all that kind of stuff. That's why they call them the dominant one. So next one, let's go to trade fixture. Love it. Love it. What's a trade fixture, guys? What is that? What is a trade fixture? So a trade fixture has to do with businesses. Yes, has to do with businesses. So it's going to be a situation where a trade fixture is something that looks, talks, walks, acts, quacks like a fixture, meaning that it's part of its personal property that has been converted into real property. However, due to the fact that it is not a because it's a business, it's going to be referred to as a trade fixture, and it's going to go with the business. So I'm going to give you one more, and then we're going to wrap up our recording. So let's look at this one. Riparian rights. So riparian rights, what are those? What are those? The who, what, why, when, where of water right usage. Okay. Riparian rights, I always remember it like this: are riparian rivers and streams. It is navigable waterways. If it is a navigable waterway in any manner, shape, and or form, it's going to be riparian rights. So guys, if you're watching this on recording, thank you so much for sticking with me. Watch some of our other videos that we have on our channel. And for those of you who are with me live, hang tight because I'm going to stop the recording now.